My name is Average Joe, and I'm a proud geek with expertise in movies, superheroes, and animation.
My name is Beef Pork Ribs. I'm a fine repository of esoteric knowledge, which I suppose most people would qualify as geeky. Though I dabble in many fandoms, my main areas of expertise are anime, movies, and Belgian comics, with a strong recent insurgency of D&D.
Our mission is to bring nerd and geek culture to the masses
by sticking it all under the microscope.
Welcome to the Bat Jar Podcast.
Movies, comics, graphic novels, TV, cartoons, animation, nerds are geeks, entertainment culture. Hear it on the Bat Jar, Nerdy Power. Nerds and geeks, come gather around the scene. Come and join us in the Bat Jar. Come and tune into Average Joe and his team. Lots of room here in the Bat Jar. When the newest nerdy news drops, these podcast pals put it under the scope. DC, Marvel, Disney, Star Wars, cinematic, multiverses, mega Christmas, Finch's franchise. Hear it on the Bat Jar, Nerdy Power.
Hello there, and welcome to the Bat Jar Podcast, where we put nerd and geek culture under the microscope.
I will say, Average Joe, I don't usually participate in the sound effects. It's usually mostly you in post or with the Bat Jar, but I did almost turn on the original Super Smash Brothers theme for the N64 because I do have a TV and an N64 in the room in which I record.
Don't worry, we will edit that in post, so people
perfect.
will be able to hear it once we get going. I just want to put a disclaimer out there. I got my second dose of the COVID vaccine yesterday, and if you have gotten a vaccine, you'll know that one of the side effects is like this kind of like fatigue and tiredness, and I'm definitely feeling that today. So, if I seem like I'm like out of it a little bit, that'd be why. And then Beeper, you've also been doing a lot of traveling this weekend, so you're probably a little out of it too.
Yeah, so don't expect us to have a very in-depth week, though we're still going to say relevant things, I think, generally speaking.
Yeah. We are here to talk about the Super Smash Brothers franchise. It's the first time we've talked about video games in a while, and good for you, Beeper, to keep making sure that we talk about video games, because admittedly, I'm not a gamer. I've said it many times, and so the video game topics kind of fall to the wayside. So this is a franchise that has been going on since 1999, so at this point, it's over 20 years old. Am I counting right?
Yeah, no. Yes.
Oh boy.
Yes. It is 22 years old.
So let's just get started with our secret origin segments. Beeper, how were you exposed to the Super Smash Brothers franchise?
When I was a young lad, many of my friends had an N64, but I did not. And so when I went to visit my friends, we played Super Smash Bros. And it was amazing. I loved it, but my parents had certain reservations about a game in which you smack people with a baseball bat or a giant hammer, as well as we didn't have the console for it, so I never quite got to play it other than at my cousins or my friends. But I love the game so very much that when I was able to buy my own Nintendo 64 in grade 10, that is the first game that I acquired for it. Ever since then, I've never loved any of the other entries as much as the first, but I think that's mostly to do with muscle memory and the A-B button being reversed on the GameCube, and that just completely threw me off. But I've appreciated seeing the expansion of the series, and I have actually played the most recent one, and I thought it was pretty great.
I have a distinct memory of you from when we both lived in Ottawa. This was like long after the day of the N64. Like the Wii U probably was like the newest Nintendo console at that point, and you were setting up your N64 and having people play Smash Brothers on the N64, even though at that point it was probably like 4 generations old. And I remember you being a huge advocate for the original game.
Yeah, I mean, it is my favorite. Also, I'm not going to lie, there's a slight bias because it's the only one I can ever consistently win at. So there is something of that. But the other thing is that also it's the one where I do technically have this one very niche thing where I'm undefeated my entire life, which is the 99 stock game in the original Super Smash Bros. I've never lost one of those, but I've only played like about half a dozen of them.
Yeah, ironically enough, like the first console I remember us having was an N64. And for whatever reason, we didn't get Super Smash Brothers. But I remember playing the game at friends' houses, and it was like one of the best games to play. Just the idea that all these characters that were part of different games, and admittedly, I think at that point I'd only been familiar with Pokemon and Zelda, so I really didn't know much of the other franchise. But just the idea that they're all together and they're fighting, it was a lot of fun. And I got a GameCube, got the second Smash Brothers game for the GameCube. That was a great game. But I kind of fell off the Nintendo bandwagon by the time the Wii came out. And honestly, it was the announcement of Super Smash Brothers 4 and all the characters that were going to be a part of it that made me want to get a Wii U console. So I bought a Wii U console specifically so I could play the Super Smash Brothers game that was going to be made for that console.
Yeah, I mean, it was... And I think one of the things also, they've gotten really good at hyping up the new Super Smash Bros. Like every time I see a new one, I'm like, oh man, maybe I shouldn't just play the original. And that was definitely the case when the Switch version came out. My roommate at the time got it, and I did actually play with him a fair amount, even though he thoroughly destroyed me because he'd been playing that one and other more recent entries. But I really enjoyed it in spite of all of that.
So a little bit of a secret origin for the franchise. The kind of mastermind, if you will, behind the Super Smash Brothers franchise is Masahiro Sakurai. He is most famous outside of Smash Bros. For creating the Kirby franchise. And apparently the origin story of Super Smash Brothers is that Sakurai got working at Nintendo and the kind of like side company HAL Laboratories at a young age. And he went to an arcade once to get inspiration for a new game. And so he decided to play a fighting game. And in this fighting game, he like soundly defeated his opponent. And when he looked at like the console on the other side or the machine, he realized there was like this young teenage couple who had never played the game before. And the reason why they were defeated so easily is because they didn't know how to play the game. So Masahiro got this idea. It's like, what if we were to make a fighting game that anyone could pick up and play? Because even at that point in the mid 1990s, like fighting games had kind of developed a reputation. What was that?
Sorry, it's just interesting because I will... I think I'll get to it in a second, but like there are a lot of major differences between Super Smash Bros. And other arcade games that I kind of want to talk about. But sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your...
The secret origin must be completed.
Yeah, let's finish that.
So Masahiro got the idea, let's make a fighting game that anyone can play. And I think the way he talked about it, it's easy to play, but it's hard to master. And from there, he came up with this game called Dragon King the Fighter. And the ideas would be the first console exclusive fighting game. And originally they had these like just like these generic karate guys in the game. And he took a huge risk. He asked Nintendo, it's like, I think this game will actually do better if we just sort of use all the famous characters from the franchises that Nintendo had already built up. And Nintendo, of course, is famous for being very protective of their intellectual properties, and that'll come up again in the conversation today. But surprisingly, they went along with it, and they gave them kind of a modest budget for the first game, which is why you only start with 8 fighters, and then it gets up to 12.
Yeah, and I mean, it is... I think it is definitely um, something that I think worked really well for the game, because outside of the game mechanics, like the idea of just putting all the Mario characters like in a place, like it was a very different kind of take. And as as far as I know, it predated some of the other games where it's like, Mortal Kombat versus DC, or like other things where you would put, well known characters in a fighting franchise that already existed. And you know there are people who love playing specific characters, not because they're good, but because it's like, oh yes, finally this game franchise has been recognized. I can play as a Fire Emblem character. A lot of people were really excited about that, and I think that has in some part helped the success of the game. But I think what is the most important thing is kind of what you mentioned, what he was saying, going with, which was a game that was easy to pick up and hard to master, because that is something that is really, I think, the kind of like the central core of Super Smash Bros., especially in relation to other games.
Yeah, and admittedly, that's what I liked about it. We just did our Mortal Kombat episode a few months ago, and I complained about anytime I've tried to play a Mortal Kombat game, it's too hard for me. And so Super Smash Brothers was right in my wheelhouse. It was easy to play, but then, even though the controls were simple, like people who knew how to play the game well were way better than me. And I could never understand how like some of these like lamer characters that I could never figure out how to use, like even Mario. I hate using Mario in Super Smash Brothers, but yet there's some people that are really good when they're using him.
Yeah, and I think, and that's the thing, is that I actually, I forgot to put this in my secret origin stories because I just remembered it. When I was in high school in grade 12, we had to do reviews, and I did a review of Super Smash Bros. As a game and compared it to other arcade fighting games that existed before it. And it is a very strong contrast to a lot of them. Like if you look at something like Street Fighter, or Mortal Kombat, or the other big one, Soul Calibur, there's either going to be characters that cannot be defeated, um, or there's going to be a very, very high skill level entry point, which is the case of like Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter, or just one move that will constantly win, which both Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat had a problem with. And I mean, yeah, Soul Calibur had a massive imbalance between a lot of its characters. It's gotten better, but at the time, there was kind of this, it was kind of like that. And there were few people who could win with just any character, and few people could kind of pick up the game. And Super Smash Bros. Was very different for a few reasons. The biggest one being there are no combos in Super Smash Brothers. That you don't have to hit 20 different buttons. In theory, in the original game, there's um, only 12 moves that each character have. They've got up, down, left, right, regular attack, power attack, and then special moves. And even there's only 3 special moves. So it's a very limited catalog, but that you can do a lot with. And the other thing that Super Smash Bros. Was different, and that I think is great, and other people are trying to emulate more and more, is that the characters moved in a natural way. Like, I don't know if you ever played like the really old Street Fighters or Mortal Kombat. Like, if you move towards your opponent, it just looks super janky. Like, you take like a half step and stop. And, it is a lot more about knowing the right combos than actually having tight movement and good, skills in using the simple moves.
Yeah, I mean, most fighting games from that time, the screen was kind of fixed. You only had so much space to move around in, and it was usually like one-on-one, one player versus another or a computer. And most fighting games had like a health meter, so like that was kind of the gauge of if you won or not, if you knocked the person's health out. And Smash Brothers kind of literally, like, no pun intended, smashed that by saying, no, like, we're going to have the camera be able to move around, like the stages will be larger, we'll have up to 4 players, and we won't have it be health bar based. It'll be kind of like this percentage system, and we'll have it either time based or stock based, like having many options and different ways to play the game.
Yeah, and also what was kind of great about the percentage rather than a health bar is that it also like got in the entire weight thing, which kind of existed already with other games such as Mario Kart, but they kind of like introduced it and made it work really well, right? Because that is another thing. Like Donkey Kong is slower and doesn't fly as well, but also takes more damage, and it really added a lot of complexity to the characters that again weren't great or didn't really exist that much in different fighting games at the time.
I don't know if they've thought of this, but certainly a secret win of it being like a Nintendo All-Star game is that I learned about a lot of Nintendo characters for the first time through Super Smash Brothers. I'd never heard of Samus before. I'd never really heard of Fox before. And I certainly had never heard of Captain Falcon before.
I actually think that Captain Falcon, like that the F-Zero game series only survived because of Super Smash Bros. And possibly the F-Zero anime, because like, yeah, nobody like, I mean, I do have, or my brother or I, one of us has the F-Zero fighting, racing game from the Nintendo 64, but we would have never bought it if it wasn't for the fact that we knew, oh, that's the game Captain Falcon is in.
Yeah, and originally the first Smash Brothers was only meant to be released in Japan. They're like, we're not going to release this worldwide. They weren't sure it was going to be, successful, but it was. So they gave it a worldwide release in 1999. And because it was so successful, Nintendo basically asked Sakurai to essentially immediately start working on a new game to be a launch title for the Nintendo GameCube, which came out in 2001. So the second game in the series, Super Smash Bros. Melee, was kind of developed over like a 13-month period, like a very short time window. And for many people, this is like the best Super Smash Bros. Ever has gotten.
I mean, yeah, it was really good, and it changed a lot of things. I don't know. I mean, I definitely disagree. I think that, the original is the one I enjoy the most, and the most current iteration, I think, is the best, both because it is better balanced competitively and for the amateur level, which is something that there was a little bit of trouble, I think, with Melee. Yeah. And which you did start seeing when there were tournaments and characters that were banned, that there was a little bit more imbalance in some of the characters, like especially, and I think that was the first one that they patched certain things, because I just remember Pichu being like Pichu and Jigglypuff being ridiculously overpowered.
Yeah, so when Super Smash Bros. Melee came out, it was a huge success. It's the most sold GameCube game that ever came out, which is kind of sad because it came out the first year the GameCube was around. And to this day, there are people who play competitive Super Smash Bros. Melee. And this is kind of part of the story of the Smash Bros. Franchise, is that in terms of a certain group, I couldn't believe it, but there's literally like an online competitive Super Smash Bros. Melee community that when the third game came out, Brawl for the Wii, they straight up rejected it. They didn't like how the game was slowed down and how it was basically made to make it easier for casuals to play. And so they just sort of continued doing Melee tournaments and playing Super Smash Bros. Melee competitively. And even to this day, there are still people so dedicated to Melee that they would rather play it than any other game in the series.
To be fair, I'd rather play the original than any other games, but yeah, it was kind of a phenomenon. But I think it also, I might be going a little bit into my opinions, but like when a lot of the remakes for the GameCube, like a lot of the games for the GameCube were remakes of successful N64 games, because that's what Nintendo does. They also innovate themselves completely every couple of consoles, but the GameCube wasn't one of them. Other than Luigi's Mansion, which was wholly original, and like maybe Metroid Prime Hunter, but like most of the remakes of games that were made for the GameCube didn't feel very good. Like Double Dash did not feel like Mario Kart, and like a lot of other things kind of seemed to not hit quite the same note. I mean, there were still good games, and like, but I feel like the fact that Melee came out in the first year, it was great, everybody loved it, was kind of like a pointer towards it was. I'm not surprised that it's the one that sold the best because it seemed to be the one, ironically, that had the most polish to it. Weirdly enough, as like a sequel, because it actually did change and add different things that weren't in the original and fixed a lot of things that were problems of the original. Whereas I think most of the other sequel games that came out for the GameCube either completely changed the game or didn't really reinvent the style at all.
And this is where the series, I think, starts to diverge a bit because, again, like Sakurai's original idea was to have a fighting game that anybody can pick up and play. But as this community of competitive Melee players started to emerge, all of a sudden there was this distinction between like people who were competitive and people who were not. I think the biggest example of this is like the question of should we have items on when we play?
I mean, that's an old question. That was in the original one too. A lot of people hate playing with items or certain items, or
But the point of the items is to, again, like equalize the experience for the casual fans so that it adds a bit of randomness so that somebody who is less skilled can perhaps come out on top. And I've been the recipient of that many times.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? It's like there's that distinction and like different ways to approach playing the game.
But I think that also speaks to the fact that it is very variable, if that makes sense. Like you can do this, you can play this game in several different ways, and sometimes you will be able to play in a way that a friend who wouldn't play will. If you and I decided to play together, I don't know, you probably wouldn't want to play a like 99 stock game, right?
No, that's too long.
Yeah, exactly. Like most people don't play it, which is why I've never lost one. But like I absolutely love it because it's really big. It's really it kind of evens out some of the difficulties. You know what I mean? Like it evens out some of the skill gap. Like it does make it more about skill because the item don't randomly make somebody win, but at the same time, it's also about playing the game to its fullest. I don't know, and I really love that. Whereas like I always thought timed was dumb. I never liked playing timed, and I know people who only play timed, and I don't think like Melee ruined it, and I also think like Melee also was one of the earlier games to start having a competitive scene, and a lot of those games have like the first games to make it like to have like tournaments and have a competitive scene do have a tendency to still have a much bigger divide between casuals and pros than even games that have become competitive since or were made to be competitive might have, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and then that brings us to the third game in the series, Super Smash Bros. Brawl, which came out in 2008 for the Nintendo Wii. People think this is one of the most important games in the Smash Brothers series because it's really where we saw this division of the community between the people who refused to play Brawl because they thought Melee was better, and then people who are, again, like people like myself in the more casual camp, choosing to play the version that was like easier for newcomers to play. And like, yeah, I distinctly remember not really loving Brawl all that much. I'm like, yeah, the movements are kind of a lot slower and you can trip over yourself. And there's all of a sudden these special moves that can like basically like nuke the whole screen.
Yeah, I think that one really polarized. Like the Smash Balls definitely polarized the should you have items or not kind of question in there. But that was also the first one to include non-Nintendo characters, correct?
Yes, and that's admittedly like it's getting like this is kind of the story with the rest of the Smash Brothers franchise is that, at least for me, what's gotten me excited at every new installment is like who are the characters that they're going to introduce, because originally this was just all Nintendo franchises, and I'd never heard of Fire Emblem or Earthbound before, so I was like, oh, these are just random characters from, I guess,
Earthbound
Nintendo
is
games.
a Nintendo franchise.
But then when in Brawl they had Sonic the Hedgehog and Solid Snake, I'm like, whoa, I know who those are, and they're not from Nintendo. How are they able to do this? I have so many questions.
Yeah. And it was, and I mean, it's even like now it's gotten to be this kind of like almost a point of pride even for like indie gamers. Like it was, when Sans from Undertale made it in, people were like, "Oh, this is amazing," because the big company is recognizing this indie game from people. Like it's almost become a point of pride. It's like it's become almost the equivalent of like having the video game equivalent of having Weird Al Yankovic do a parody of your song is having one of the character for your game included in Smash Bros.
Yeah, and that trend continued with the fourth series, which kind of was like split a bit, I guess, because there was a version that was out for the 3DS, and then there was also the version for the Wii U. And what got me excited about this is that they were announcing even more third-party characters like Mega Man and Pac-Man, and I think that was the one where they introduced like Ryu from Street Fighter and Cloud from Final Fantasy. And I was like, I've never really played these games, but I understand these are significant video game characters. And honestly, I think the biggest thing that got me excited for it was the fact that they had invented a version where you could play with 8 people.
Oh yeah, that was crazy, but it was that's the real equalizer there. Nobody can skills when you play an 8-player game with like friendly fire on or like 8v8 and with items, sometimes skill just becomes irrelevant and it's great.
Oh yeah, and I remember I have fond memories of playing with 8 people, and like we had to have all these different kinds of controllers because of course there were 8 of us, so some people were playing with their 3DS, some people were playing with a GameCube controller, some people were playing with like the Wii remote, someone was playing with a gamepad that was part of the Wii U, and it was just a lot of fun and like super crazy. Like you have 8 characters on the screen plus a stage that moves plus items, and it gets pretty wild pretty fast.
But it also gave like a new, because I do remember playing Super Smash Bros. Like at a party when I was younger, and it was like always, whoever there were like it's either whoever wins rotates out or whoever loses rotates out, and it was like always arguments about who would get to play next because you could only have 4 controller. But with 8, like yeah, you usually won't have more than 8 people who want to play Smash Bros. At the same time.
Yeah, and unfortunately for Smash 4, it was on the Wii U, which was a system that did not sell well. So I think that specific game is actually really good, but unfortunately it kind of like was attached to something that wasn't very successful. So
I mean, if the Switch
name.
hadn't been made, the Wii U might have sold a little bit better, but then the Switch was what the Wii U, it seemed to just be what the Wii U was trying to be.
Yeah. But and then this kind of brings us to the most recent game for the Nintendo Switch, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. They decided they wanted to like bring back every character who had been in the game previously. So you start out with the original 8, but then there's 74 different characters that you can play in the newest one. And someone made a comment that like they're at the point now where they're introducing characters from like the Tekken series and the Final Fight series and like all these like actual fighting games as Smash Brothers characters. And it's like, well, this whole series was kind of founded on the idea that this wasn't a fighting game.
Yes, but at the same time, they're still being played as Super Smash Bros. Characters, which is something they're not depending on combo. They're still just characters from other games brought into Super Smash Bros. I will admit that my biggest problem with those characters coming in is the aesthetic, which was always like my problem with Solid Snake, is he just looked out of place with everybody else.
Yeah, he kind of looks like Captain Falcon.
Kind of, but not really. And I feel that's a bigger problem for me, but I do know people who are a little annoyed at how many have been added. But I don't know. I always thought that was, again, one of the things that was great. I think the only thing that I would say about the 74 characters is I'm reading the notes in the agenda. How many are clones? Do you want to speak to that? Because that's that is the one thing I think is kind of bogging the game down a little bit.
Well, I can remember even as far back as Melee that it was clear that essentially there were characters that were essentially just a different version of another character, and I
To
feel
be
like
fair,
that's
that
only
one was a little rushed, so it made sense.
yeah, that one I guess, but the other one, as they went on, it's kind of sad. It's like you have some, I guess, like types of characters that essentially a bunch of people fall into, and to me, it's like, well, why have so many characters if like 3 or 4 of them are versions of the same thing?
Yeah, I mean,
Like Dr. Mario is
yeah,
not.
Doctor. I think my biggest grief was with Pichu. It was just Pikachu slightly faster and slightly weaker.
And he like hurt himself when he used his
Yeah, that was
powers.
so bad. But like even like Ganondorf was exactly the same as Captain Falcon, but slower and a little more powerful. And that was that one I just never understood. Like there were some that I got a little bit more. For example, I never minded that like Mewtwo was like half a clone of Samus, and I think that worked because they took an element of Samus and like put it onto another character where it made sense instead of just creating a character that's so close. I think if they had done more of that or more like mix and match, if you know what I mean, like have like one of the B, like have one of the, you know, have the up B be similar to another character, but then have his down B be something different. Like if Falco still had like the shield because, you know, it makes sense, but not the Firefox because it makes no sense for him to have the fire attack that, you know, Fox had, but he could have had something else to do with his wings, and then that, you know, he'd still have some moves that are similar, but it would, but having like mixing and matching moves would make it even more kind of a, you know, a variety of character and a variety of experiences.
Or the fact that by the final game there's like 3 different versions of Link.
Yeah, but actually Link is the one where most of them are not clones. They have completely different move sets that are based on
Toon
the
Link and Young Link, like it's pretty similar, isn't it?
I mean, now, yeah, but the first 2 links that they added were completely different than the original. So it was kind of because, which I thought was really well thought out because they were using different items from the games and using more iconic items because, like, yeah, because the boomerang, the bombs, and the Master Sword were iconic of Ocarina of Time, but then they introduced Kid Link and they gave items that were, you know, a lot more useful in Link's Awakening, I think, but like they were changing it up at the beginning, and I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, and if I think of like even at the Brawl era, they all of a sudden started introducing all these characters from JRPGs and games I never heard of before, and it almost started to feel like an anime because so many of these characters from like Fire Emblem and stuff essentially look like anime characters, and then that, as you said, like it makes the aesthetic look weird because you put them next to Mario and it's like, oh, like these are very different things.
Yeah, and even some of the Nintendo characters, I'm like a little questioning like having the Piranha Plant or, you know, having Ridley, Ridley, I can't remember, Ridley, yeah, the dragon from Samus, from Metroid, sorry, it was kind of weird because these characters are supposed to be much bigger. Like in an earlier version, he appears as part of the stage, and now he's a playable character. I always found that one to be a little strange.
Yeah, it definitely seems like they're running out of new ideas, I suppose. And it's like I mean, they've done some crazy like acquisitions of getting like Steve from Minecraft or the hero from the Dragon Quest series. I'm like, these are like, it seems like almost nothing in terms of video game characters is off limits to them.
Yeah, but I also think, and this is something I think the series should take credit for, is that all the entries are different enough, and I think that on the whole, like just despite my personal taste and views on some of them, there is definitely an effort to improve on the game. And that's something that I like seeing in a game series because a lot of franchises don't have that. Like they will, you know, a lot of video game series will get a little bit lazy and just kind of remake the same game and not try to add major improvements or try to give it a better quality of life. And I feel like throughout its history, Super Smash Bros. Has consistently maybe not accomplished getting better and better, but at least tried to improve the game with every iteration.
And yet there's this whole community that are still devoted to Melee. There was like, I heard about this one incident at like a video game convention in 2013 where they were going to like live stream a Melee tournament, and Nintendo came in and said, you can play the game, but you can't stream it. And there was such a huge backlash that they eventually backpedaled on that. But it's just sort of funny because, again, there's this, I couldn't believe it. Like, people are like upset and angry. And I'm like, you guys are way too attached to this video game. And they're like calling Nintendo like evil and whatnot. I'm like, they're the owners of this. Like, it makes sense that they would want to promote the most recent version of the game. Sorry that you're still attached to like this version.
Yeah, but I think it's kind of strange to still, pardon me. I think it's strange to still want to force, like, to force an event to play some of these, because, like, I still play, the N64 version because I have an N64. I enjoy it more. You can entirely do that with, with your friends and not have to like force the game community to go backwards, because games do move on, and regardless of how you feel, I do think that there is an effort made to make the games better. And I think you don't just constantly going back to something because you liked it better tends to get this like nostalgia inflation, which I definitely have with the original game. But I can recognize that. I can say, like, objectively, Smash Bros has gotten better since. It's just the one I enjoy the most. But I wouldn't like try to force an event to happen to cater to the fact that I like that one better. The only real argument that can be made for Melee, and which I do understand, is that Melee was the most competitively balanced game. But I don't think that's a good thing, because that was never the point of Super Smash Bros. It was always supposed to be balanced to amateurs. And I think that holding on to something that was less like that is a mistake.
So you would have words for this Melee fandom if you encountered them.
Look, I'm sure you guys are great people if you're listening. I'm addressing the entire fandom, but like, get over it. The game has changed, and enjoying the game you have, great. Keep playing it. Keep running emulators. Keep creating versions of a game that highly resemble it. I know that exists. Like, go for it. Have fun. But like, you have to recognize that that was never what the game was intended to be, and it doesn't need to fit into that particular box. And I think that's, again, we talked about it several times, one of the great strengths of Super Smash Brothers is that almost anybody can find a way to enjoy it.
As a kid, I never really questioned the shared universe element of Super Smash Brothers. It just sort of seemed natural that all of those characters would, I guess, occupy the same space.
But the original had a backstory that explained that.
I mean, a little bit.
I mean, more than some other games have. Like the fact that the Master Hand was the final boss, and the fact that you saw in the opening introduction the Master Hand pick up two toys, drop them together, and then the objects in the background became the stage. I mean, it's enough to set it up that no, they're in the shared universe because they are toys fighting.
Yeah, there's actually some fan theories that the hand that you see at the beginning of the game is not Master Hand and it's some other hand. But regardless, that I guess what you're saying is like it isn't, and they're not trying to tell us that all these characters exist in the same universe, is that it's meant to be kind of like a Lego movie situation where a child is kind of like mashing all their toys together.
That's how I always viewed Super Smash Bros. And I'll be honest, I don't know much of the lore of the other games, but I feel like that somewhat stayed true. Maybe more of like a League of Legends kind of lore, where it's like, well, these characters exist, but they were taken into this new world in order to resolve conflicts. I mean, technically in League of Legends, they still are from the same universe, but they wouldn't be playing together unless they were brought into this arena specifically. And I feel like that's the same thing with like Super Smash Bros., whether it's from different universes or just different parts of a very weird universe. um, they don't like they wouldn't share the universe except for Super Smash Brothers.
Yeah, I mean, this really pioneered that idea of a crossover event long before we kind of. I mean, we expect that now. Unfortunately, we have like movies like Ready Player One or the new Space Jam or the MCU. There's all these crossovers that is the norm now.
Yeah. Well, not just movies, but even like, even fighting games like um Soul Calibur used to be just original characters, but now like there's so many like there's, they added Jedis, they added like famous, swordsmen from anime. Like they've been adding a lot of characters, which is something the game didn't really do at first. And I think I'm not sure, but I think that like Super Smash Bros. Came before you had all the like, Capcom versus Marvel or DC Universe versus Mortal Kombat. All those games where you take the game and then just add characters from random places. And I think Mortal Kombat 10 had like Rambo as a playable character in it.
And RoboCop and the Terminator and
Yeah, like that's ridiculous, but it is kind of emulating what Super Smash Bros. Has been doing, and I think has been making it work.
and like the last Injustice game, the Ninja Turtles were playable characters. Hellboy was a playable character.
Yeah, and I think like people enjoy it, and I don't knock it, but I feel like it works best in a game that has the lore to back it up. Otherwise, it feels a little strange, and that's what like I know that like in Mortal Kombat they tried to justify it, and it kind of makes sense because all those characters are from versions of Earth, so they could be fighting for Earthrealm. But at the same time, because Super Smash Bros. Always had that and started off that way, I feel like it makes a lot more sense.
So I gotta ask, who are your main characters that you would use if you were to play Smash Brothers right now?
Oh, Pikachu. And then in the original, I'd play Ness as well. In Melee, I would play Mewtwo. And then in all the other ones, I would play Kirby or Pikachu or Donkey Kong, because Donkey Kong can always still just walk off the platform holding somebody.
I've always been partial to Captain Falcon. There was, I think it was in Melee where Zelda and Sheik were like the same character and you transformed. I liked using her.
Oh yeah, my brother really liked the mechanic with Pokemon Trainer. You could switch between the three Pokemons in the same way you could switch between like Sheik and Zelda.
I also have very fond memories of using the Wii Fit Trainer when it got to the Wii U version.
Yeah. Or Little Mac. Little Mac is just a fun one just because it's such an iconic game, but that has like I think that the addition of Little Mac came before the remake. I'm not sure, but I think it did like kind of reignite this, this passion for the Mike Tyson knockout game.
Yeah, and you mentioned that Smash Brothers has really kept F-Zero alive. Apparently, like Fire Emblem wasn't really a thing in North America before Marth and Roy were in Melee. So I remember just being like, "Who are these guys?" And like they're only speaking Japanese, and
Which is funny because Fire Emblem is like the furthest thing away from a fighting game there is.
So at this point, they've got the Duck Hunt dog. They got Mr. Game & Watch. They got Pac-Man. They got Banjo and Kazooie. So you got to ask, like, if they're making another Smash game, like, what characters are left to include? It seems like they've kind of like reached as
Gex
far back.
From Enter the Gecko, Conkers from Conker's Bad Fur Day, as well as any character from Conker's Bad Fur Day. You still have a handful of bounty hunters from Metroid that haven't been touched. You still, I think, only 2 of the Kongs are currently playable characters in any of the Smash Bros. Games. So you got the entire Kong family.
Yeah, but how different would they be? Like, I don't want just more clones.
Well, if you've ever played the Donkey Kong 64 game, they all have very different abilities and skills. So I think you can make it pretty different.
Like, do we want to see Sub-Zero as a Smash character?
Oh, definitely. But also, I would love to see Lanky Kong as a playable character in Smash Bros. I think it would be amazing.
I mean, hearing that they already have the Dragon Quest hero in there who has the Akira Toriyama art style, I'm like, let's just put a Dragon Ball character in there. Let's just go there.
I mean, I think that's the next step is adding anime characters. It's so here's the next step. The next Super Smash Bros is going to be a mashup with what's the name of the Shonen Jump fighting game?
Oh, Jump Force?
Yeah, Jump Force. I mean, because Jump Force is a video game and it's a fighting game. They've been adding more fighting game characters. Just smash in Jump Force with Super Smash Bros.
Well, I'm like, the Joker from Persona 5 is in the newest Smash. And I'm like, I know that was a video game first, but it was also made into an anime. So I'm like, why not throw Goku in there? I mean, they'd obviously have to like power him down so that he wouldn't just demolish everybody. But if Simon Belmont can be there and Ryu from Street Fighter can be there, why not Goku?
Oh yeah, no, for sure. But maybe they'll start with the other animes that were video games first, and then move on to the other ones. I don't know, but you definitely, yeah, you have a like you can bring any Danganronpa character in that if you wanted to, and there are many games that have not yet kind of been that don't exist yet because the new Smash Bros keeps adding characters. Like Ultimate has added characters after it's released that are from newer games. So like I don't know, Meat Boy might show up. Maybe it's about time Microsoft realized that they should sell some of their franchise to a better company, and Master Chief is going to show up.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that, but this idea of DLC that in the original Smash game, certain characters became unlockable once you performed a certain task. And the most recent version since the Wii U have essentially just made them pay to play. It's like, oh, if you want to use Cloud, you got to pay a DLC fee.
Yeah, I mean, it is something that I don't know. I think it's just the issue of DLC generally speaking in video games is something we could probably do an entire podcast episode on, though I wouldn't recommend it because I don't think it's a very interesting point of view. But I don't know. I think that there's enough there that still hasn't been used that you could pick up from other video game franchises and other kind of elements. And I feel like they also still have to keep a solid core. And I actually would be a fan of them going back to specific, more iconic characters, maybe from video. Like, I would like to see more side characters from iconic Nintendo franchises rather than, main characters from other franchises. Like I said, bring some of the Kongs in, bring, different characters from look, there's so many Legend of Zelda games and all of them have iconic characters that could be amazing. Like just bring the mask seller from Majora's Mask. That'd be great. Or Skull Kid, bring in, you've added Mega Man. You could literally add any of the robot masters into the game and they'd all have different abilities.
And I guess we should mention Meta Knight. He's the character. I think he was one of the sticking points people have with Brawl is that Meta Knight became like this broken character who was impossible to defeat.
Impossible is kind of a strong word. He had a couple of moves that were really hard, but again, it's one of those, I think it wasn't that bad. I think you just had to learn how to play against him. And that's what people disliked is that to have fun, you had to learn to counter a specific character rather than just being able to pick up anybody.
So here we are, where it's the year 2021. It's been at least 5 or 6 years since the last Smash Brothers game. I have no idea what Nintendo's plans are for another console, but we have yet to see multiple Smash Brothers games come out for the same console. So, Beeper, you kind of alluded to this, we're talking about Smash 6. You would like to see the roster scaled back and if I'm hearing you correctly, focus less on guest stars and more characters from the kind of core Nintendo brands.
Yeah, and I think also I think also it would be an occasion to, review some of the older games that did not do as well, but maybe deserve a revival or could get a revival. Like, I mean, people have been asking for a new Conker's Bad Fur Day game for a really long time, but I don't think it'll ever happen. But that's a way it might be able to happen, you know, or maybe even something completely random, like have Brian from Quest 64, a game that basically nobody's ever played, but get a revival. RPGs are big right now, and that game was like one of the first open world 3D RPGs ever made, and it's terrible, but probably because it's one of the first ones.
I guess I'm on the other side of the fence though, because I'm like, at this point, the only thing that would get me to buy a new Smash Brothers game or play it is to have more crossover, have more characters from franchises I would normally see in Smash Brothers. Like I personally have no interest in seeing more Donkey Kong characters or more Kirby characters or like more, because in my mind, like I hear what you're saying, you can make them unique, but generally like they're similar enough that I'm like, let's get a Goku in there. Let's get a SpongeBob SquarePants in there. He's had video games.
Yeah, but at the same time, mods have been made to include those characters just as reskins. So there is, I think, just as much a potential for those to become clones as adding new characters from the same video game franchise. Like I distinctly remember an episode of Code Ment where there is a reskin of Captain Falcon, which is Goku, and Lelouch is a reskin of Marth, and you know you can do that pretty easily. Like, Goku's movesets could easily be just Samus and Captain Falcon, right? He charges up his Kamehameha and he punches really hard. Like, I think the risk of it being stale is there regardless of who the characters are. And that's why I think it would make more sense and be better to just bring in old Nintendo franchises or more Nintendo franchises, Like, don't try to do Skyward Sword by bringing the Link of Skyward Sword. Bring an interesting character, or Twilight Princess. Unless you brought in Wolf Link, which I think would be amazing. But like that kind of thing.
So you don't own a Nintendo Switch, correct?
I do not.
So how likely are you to buy the next Nintendo console to get the next Smash Brothers?
Not very likely. I will admit I'm probably unlikely to ever buy a new console in my life from now on. But I'm ready to be surprised.
Yeah, I don't think I am either. I went out of my way to buy the Wii U specifically so I could play that Smash Brothers game. And in the end, like once I moved out of a men's house, the Wii U kind of just collected dust, and I ended up selling it after 2 years. So I think the days of me buying video game consoles is past. And I'm sure like if the next Smash Brothers is amazing, I will like invite myself over to a friend's house to go and
Or
play
one of
it.
your brothers.
Yeah, one of my brothers for sure, because they both have Switches, I think. I can't remember actually.
And at least one has children, so that is the one thing that might change me buying a console is children.
And being able to like play the game with children.
Yeah, but again, I think I'm more likely to buy like a GameCube or a Nintendo Entertainment System because those are games that I liked better and grew up with more.
Oh man, NES games are so boring.
What? SNES, sorry. Super Nintendo.
I mean, they require a lot of precision, which I don't have, which is part of like why I don't enjoy playing those older games. But in summation here, Super Smash Brothers is the fighting game that is easy to play but hard to master. And as someone who's always been a more casual consumer of video games, Super Smash Brothers met me where I was at in terms of my willingness and ability to play like a fighting game. And the franchise has admittedly ballooned to enormous success, online competitive environments, 5 games in the franchise, 74 playable characters. And I don't know, should we give like the series a back cookie? Do we do that?
No, we might as well. Yeah, I mean, all right. I'll give it the series as a whole. I will give a 3.8 out of 4 bat cookies. It has improved itself. It's always been good. It's always been dear to my heart, and I think it's still one. It's still deservedly so. Is one of Nintendo's mainstay franchises.
And I will give it 3.6 out of 4 bad cookies. I feel like there's a lot of, if I'm going to be super critical, there's a lot of repetition in their like cloning of characters and reskinning and whatnot. So that would be the only thing I could say negatively about it, keeping from being perfect. And a beeper, if we were to play right now, you would want to play without items. Is that correct?
Either without items or without hammers and smash balls.
I'd be willing to go along with that. Yeah, the hammer is one of the items in the game that basically it's like it makes you invincible, and it's super annoying.
It doesn't make you invincible. There are ways.
Well, no, but you know what I mean. Like it generally, once if you get in the way of the person and you don't know what you're doing, you're gonna die.
Yeah, I think in the original Kirby was the only person who could interrupt it.
By like sucking them up.
No, by doing his rock fall on them because it made him invulnerable. But could still damage people. Maybe Yoshi could eat them if he was far enough away, but I think the hitbox was as long as for the hammer was as long as his tongue. I can't remember.
I guess we should mention this too before we wrap up. The game is surprisingly like, I mean, it is, I guess, violent, but it never feels violent.
It's very well done cartoon violence.
Bear this torch against the cold of the night. Search your soul and reawaken the undying light. Colors weave into a spire of flame. Distant sparks call to a past still unnamed. Bear this torch against the cold of the night. Light will guide you on your way to the ultimate light.
If you want to reach the show, you can send us an email at,
batjarpodcast@gmail.com.
or you can tweet us at.
The Bat Cookie Jar.
You can find the Bat Jar Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, including YouTube, because we got a channel. Share our posts on Facebook, write reviews, give our shows a rating. This will help all people join us inside the Bat Jar, and we appreciate it dearly.
So this is normally when we would go into the Bat Jar and pull out a topic for next time, but Black Widow is coming out in theaters where they're open, not where I am, and it's going to be on Disney Plus, which is where I'll have to watch it. But we're actually going to take a week off because I can't even remember the last time we took a week off. I think we've been
hardworking.
Yeah, we've been fairly
not.
Yeah, we've been fairly consistent. So that means that
we will return.
Yes, we will be back. If you're looking at your calendar, it means that there won't be a new episode the week of July the 11th, but there will be an episode rather, the week after that, July 18th.
Yeah.
So Monday, July the 19th should be the next time you see a podcast episode pop up. That means you'll have some time to go out and see Black Widow before we talk about it.
And just so that we don't leave you completely high and dry, because this was a video game episode, I feel I can do this plugging in awesome event called Summer Games Done Quick. It's a bunch of speedrunners that are marathoning speedruns of games on Twitch TV and fundraising for Doctor Without Borders. It started today and it will go on until the 10th, I think, or the 11th. I can't remember exactly, but it's a full week of almost nonstop streaming of speedrunning. If you know anything about speedrunning or are interested in it, check it out. It is amazing, and it's for a good cause.
So come back to the Batjar podcast in 2 weeks when we talk about the Black Widow movie. And until that time, I'm Average Joe.
I'm Beef Pork Ribs.
Catch you on the flip side.
And long live Soviet Russia, I guess.